Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rocha-Lima.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland, Harlan Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland, Harlan Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by Clare Norman. Clare is a personal coach and reflexologist and the founder of Raising Spirits. What's unique about Clare is how she draws on her professional and personal experiences to provide coaching for parents of children with special educational needs, as well as reflexology training workshops to explain the benefits of reflexology for children on the spectrum. And be sure to listen to the end, where Clare shares with us the benefits of maintaining a positive mental attitude, especially when we're faced with adversity in our lives. So whether you're interested in knowing more about personal coaching and reflexology, or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast.
Welcome, Clare Norman, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. Clare, I'm really excited about this conversation because I think this lockdown situation we're living through has augmented a lot of the difficulties and stresses of being a parent, especially so for those with special education needs children. And I'm sure that our listeners can learn a lot from your expertise in this field. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So Clare, where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Kingston originally, actually, and I grew up in Epsom and Ewell, so not far from Kingston, and spent a lot of my weekends as a teenager actually in the town centre, enjoying everything that Kingston has to offer from that point of view. Yeah.
And did you go to university? And if so, what did you study?
I did, actually. So I, as I said, was brought up in Epsom and Ewell, and I started off going to Nescott, actually, doing some A-levels and those sorts of things. And then I went straight to work because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So after a couple of years of working in public relations, I went on to study multimedia design as a degree and then interactive multimedia as a master's. And it was during that time really that I became very interested in investigating the emotions and how to stimulate different responses in people's feelings, predominantly through visuals and sound. And that really sort of was the foundation of everything really when I look back, in terms of it really led me to have a keen interest in what creates a person's perspective and their individual view of reality.
Oh, that's really interesting. And could you tell us a little bit about your career journey to date?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I said, I did do the Masters, and that was just ahead of the dot-com crash. So unfortunately, despite the fact I had various jobs lined up, they all fell through and I fell back into public relations. Mm-hmm. So the good thing about public relations, especially when I was working at the time, was that it was a bit of a, big fish, small pond scenario, and the clients were large internationals, and I really was thrown in at the deep end, and I learned a lot in those days about professionalism and business and communications. So that was a really good foundation as well in terms of being able to run a business and being able to be professional with all different types of people from different types of backgrounds and walks of life.
And bringing this conversation to the present, could you tell us a little bit about your business today?
Absolutely. So throughout the journey that I've described in terms of my education and early career in PR, I had to go through what some might consider to be a number of unfortunate circumstances. I had a bereavement very early on. My upbringing was fairly challenging in terms of family. And my dad died when I was in my early 20s, which led me to discover alternative therapies and specifically reflexology.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get any help from the doctors, conventional doctors. There wasn't any medication they could prescribe or anything that they recommended really, other than taking time off work. But I was really very unwell. And so I literally went through the yellow pages and found out about reflexology. And I went off to see a lovely lady who saw me once a week for over 2 months and wouldn't take a penny of my money. And I was absolutely fascinated how she would essentially touch my feet and it would have such a profound impact on my physical, mental and emotional well-being. I mean, she literally cured me within weeks. But as I said, I continued to go back to see her, which was under her advice. And after the end of that period of time, when I was much better and fully recuperated, I decided to learn reflexology, which was a brilliant gift, really, because I was then able to use her as a case study and sort of pay her back for all of the generosity and kindness that she'd shown me. So that was the beginning of the whole business as it is now, if you like, which was over 20 years ago now. And I've done reflexology ever since on lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds. And that always ran alongside my PR career. It was developing in the background, and little did I know it, that all the various types of adversity and challenges that I would face would build this picture of raising spirit in the future. So I ended up going to Barcelona, and I was there doing reflexology. I was working in hospitals and working with professional sports players. And other quite high profile celebrities actually during my time there. And I had a baby with my partner at the time. And unfortunately, the relationship broke down while I was pregnant. And despite being there for quite some years, it became really clear that I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. And I eventually had to leave Barcelona with my son when he was about 1 year old. So along with the turmoil that I was facing in terms of my relationship coming to an end and having to move countries and leave my home, obviously I had nowhere to go, no job, no money, a child. I was on my own. And I was really looking at my life and trying to handle what I was going through in terms of emotional abuse and financial blackmail and everything that you could possibly imagine went with the emotional turmoil of that situation. When I discovered, having returned to the UK to visit a health worker, a health visitor, that my son wasn't developing properly, or as one would have expected. Let's backtrack on that slightly. So when I got back, obviously I wanted to make sure that his vaccinations and everything were all above board with what was done in the UK. And it was around that time, when he was about 14 months or so, that this health visitor literally said to me, he's not taking to his feet. And I thought to myself, what do you mean? I can't cope with anymore. Yeah. And it was really, really distressing as I set about the journey of discovery and investigations around what was wrong with my son. I set about visiting hospitals, speaking to doctors and therapists, and having to try and balance parenting with getting a job to be able to pay for many of these investigations and therapies that needed to happen. Essentially, I learned that those that are fighting the hardest to survive and parenting their children in the hardest way are also those that have to fight the hardest to get the support that they need. Every doctor will tell you that children reaching their early milestones and accessing early intervention is crucial. Yet it became very apparent that early intervention was not available and that the waiting lists were extremely long. So my son needed to have physiotherapy. He needed to have occupational therapy. He needed to have speech and language therapy. none of which were available to me through the NHS or community services at the time. We began to seek some advice and some support through Portage, which is a service which was offered through the community for children that aren't reaching one or more of their early milestones. So that was very useful. And I continued on this journey, which essentially meant that eventually, once he'd got into nursery, that I was having to look at getting some specialist educational advice through a special educational needs coordinator and getting some support for him to access education. And that support was looking at a statement of special educational needs, which is now the Education, Health and Care Plan. So as we went on through this, he became very unwell, and his digestive system wasn't working properly either. And so it was about that time when my reflexology not only was there as a way of making money, it was really a trade, if you like. I would do it in the evenings after I'd finished my PR work, which at that time was my bread and butter. I was doing it on my son as well daily because it would really help to stimulate the digestive transit. And I was starting to advise other parents who seemingly were having very challenging circumstances as well. And it became clear to me that I'd gone through a huge amount and kept on going and navigating the system, and I had this internal drive and desire to find solutions. And I think that early investigative piece in my academic career of looking into the emotions and perspectives of people's individual realities really came to the fore and really built some sort of internal mechanism in those days that allowed me to find the right perspective on what it was that I was having to cope with. So, as I said, it was really one thing after another, and it included pretty much everything that I can think of that anyone would have a challenging time with. So obviously relationships and job and money and parenting a child, or single parenting a child, and discovering that the child wasn't developing in the right way. And it just got to the point where I thought, if I don't start looking at my life and what's gone on for me in terms of something that's positive, then I don't know what the point is anymore. And it was at a very low point where I was suffering from extreme exhaustion and adrenal fatigue, as you might expect, having gone through all of this, that I really thought I can't, it's enough. I can't carry on. And I thought I need to turn my life into something that is a positive contribution and makes a difference to others who are having to navigate challenging, stressful circumstances. Mm-hmm. So that was really the beginning of Raising Spirits. And I reached out to an organisation, a fabulous organisation in Islington called Coaching Development. And they really do have some of the most incredible international coach trainers, worldwide renowned coach trainers. And I was very, very fortunate and got a partial bursary for my coach training.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And so I got in there and I absolutely loved it. It was funny because I sort of realised coaching is very much about personal development as well as actually coaching the person who comes to you. And I realised at that point just how much personal development I had achieved and what I'd done and how I'd endured over the, however many years it was at the time of going through, that breakup and then moving back to the UK and looking for work and all of the things that I've mentioned. I really understood, what it was that I had to offer. And that really was to support people who were going through challenging circumstances, which might be stress or anxiety in relation to any one of those things. initially, Raising Spirit was established to support parents who had children with special educational needs and disabilities, because I felt a real affinity, having travelled that path myself, to support them. But as time's gone on, I've actually evolved the business now to really help anyone and anyone who finds themselves in a personal journey that's less than what they really desire, and isn't really fully bringing them happiness and fulfillment and the relationships that they want in life, or if they're going through a particular challenge. So it's really broadening out now in terms of not only helping families with children who potentially might be on the spectrum. So that could be ASD or Asperger's, autism, or ADHD, or any other disability, and supporting them with the coaching and the reflexology, but also helping anyone else who may be going through any of the things that I went through. So, relationship issues, or job issues, or a change of direction, or complete uncertainty, as is the situation now for many people. Today, due to COVID-19, there's much uncertainty around, and anticipation in terms of anticipation in terms of anxiety around what's next. And I feel that coaching is something that can be really supportive in that way. So that's really where I'm at with Raising Spirit at the moment. It's very much an evolving thing, and it's very much about meeting an individual where they're at, working in partnership with them on their journey, and using my experience and my empathy and understanding of being through really quite severe and traumatic, challenging experiences, to help them to navigate theirs. And added to the coaching is the reflexology. So obviously I'm thoroughly trained in anatomy and physiology, and therefore I can work with people, truly holistically. So I quite often coach, and we get that sort of robust and challenging conversation done first, and then they can lay back and enjoy the relaxation and the de-stressing benefits of the reflexology session. As well as that, I also offer training to parents of children with special educational needs, and I run workshops to really empower them to sort of build an additional method for communicating with their children. Quite often, speech is challenging for these kids, and the touch and the knowledge of the reflexology to support them with whatever it is that they might be suffering from symptomatically or physically, alongside the nurturing touch of a parent, can really help to build an additional channel of communication in a family. And so time and time again, that's proved to be a very it's kind of built a sacred space really for those families that I've worked with. So that's a very rewarding aspect of what I do.
That's really interesting, Claire. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with us here on the show, because what I've always wanted to do with the Inside Kingston podcast is give different professionals and entrepreneurs and community leaders and just people in the Kingston area a space or a platform to generate greater awareness and exposure of different challenges. And the way you've talked us through the challenges, or some of the challenges facing parents and the families of those of non-neurotypical kids and adult children is really an eye-opener. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. Could you talk to us a little bit about your work and how it helps parents and families facing some of those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So coaching is offered on a one-to-one basis or as group work. And as I've said, it could be with any individual. It doesn't just have to be a parent. I initially started Raising Spirit specifically for parents of children with special educational needs. But through my experience as a coach now, really I am embracing anyone who's going through a period of adversity in their life. And I would go as far as to say it brings transformational change. Clearly, parents who are having to navigate the world of special educational needs and disabilities are going through significant adversity. They are quite often faced with having to choose between caring for their child and being able to go out to work. And the statistics for families of children with disabilities are very much indicating that the relationships don't last. And unfortunately, there are divorces and separations to contend with on top of that. Mm-hmm. So the coaching is a space for somebody to have a conversation, very much in partnership with me. There's no hierarchy, and I don't bring my own opinion into it. It's really about unlocking the knowledge inside yourself, because it's based on the idea that we all know what we need to do, but we need to unlock that knowledge through a powerful conversation that can reflect on what it is that you're saying and tap into whether that is actually what you really believe. So through the one-to-one coaching, we will be looking at things like the belief system that you grew up with and whether or not that's still relevant for you now. And whose belief system is that if it's not yours? And what can you do to address that so that you can move forward more positively and more empowered? So that's the one-to-one coaching. As I said, because of my background, I'm able to combine that with a certain degree of experience and mentorship. Now, that obviously only occurs with permission of the person that I'm coaching. And if they may, for example, get stuck and not know or have any ideas of how to help themselves, again, because of the adversity that I've had to face, I have, for the last 20 years or more, had to really pull in the resources, the tools and techniques that I use myself in order to keep going. And so I can offer that as support to the people that work with me. So the one-to-one coaching is really based on those ideas, really. Group coaching or team coaching is another way of doing it. So again, initially this was for parents who shared a similar theme. So potentially parents who have children with disabilities, or parents who have children with ADHD, or parents who are going through relationship challenges, or teenagers now, for example, who might be suffering from sort of post-COVID-19 challenges. It means when you work in a coaching context with a group of people that you are able to access a collective wisdom, essentially. You're not only working with me on a one-to-one basis, you're working with each other. So your group coaching cohort are really there to support and help one another with their own advice, coping mechanisms and techniques and experience. And that really, really grows into something magical and can be applied, as I've said, to lots of different themes. I mean, essentially, you do need to all be working on the same theme. So as I've described, that might be sort of post-COVID-19 recovery, or parenting a child with special needs, or, anxiety, potentially something like that. But it really builds a support network and a support group, basically. And you're each contracted to a certain amount of group sessions. Nobody else comes into the group. The group work is kept confidential. And so it's really about developing trust initially, as is the one-to-one coaching, creating a psychologically safe space, and then looking at how to move forward from where we are now. So you never really ask why questions with coaching or with group work. It's really about what can we do? How can we do it? Where does that feeling come from? It's about taking steps forward, and it's about action, or it might be about mindset. And as I've described already, recreating your belief system, or your ideals or aims or ambitions, and really identifying whether those belong to you or belong to somebody else. And if things aren't working, what is it that you can do? So on top of that, we have the reflexology, which is as I've described earlier, a really holistic treatment that really accesses in a very profound level physical, mental and emotional well-being.
And on that, actually, Claire, sorry for butting in, but on the reflexology side of things, I'm quite curious, and I'm sure that a number of our listeners would have not been exposed to reflexology so far in their lives. For the benefit of our listeners who perhaps aren't familiar with it, could you explain what reflexology is and how you apply it with your clients?
Absolutely. So clients can come to me directly just for reflexology. So what reflexology is it's a holistic treatment that has been around for many, many, many moons. It's an ancient holistic treatment, and it's a complementary therapy. So basically what that is that it treats the whole body and all the body systems, not just the symptoms. So quite often when you are prescribed medication, it's to handle one specific symptom that you're having a particular challenge with. So let's take a simple example of a backache. You might be given some pain medication to alleviate that backache. However, the backache could be coming from stress and tension, or it could be coming from a muscular issue, or it could be coming from a whole host of other issues, a nerve issue, for example. And reflexology, due to the nature of it being holistic, treats the whole. So we are treating every single body system through the feet. So it was identified by a nurse, actually, called Eunice Ingham, who worked with a doctor, and I can't remember the date, so forgive me for that, that he was accessing these areas on the body themselves to alleviate pain. And she realised that she could map out specific reflex points on the feet, and that through the feet you could access the same body areas, basically.
Wow.
So we have a map as reflexologists of the feet, which can be found online very easily. I was trained by the Bailey School of Reflexology, and I'm a member of the British Reflexology Association. And so we can access all the organs, all the glands, all the muscles, all the bones. And we do stimulate each and every one of those points on the feet with every single session or treatment that we do. What happens is that you basically take your shoes and socks off and you lay down and you enjoy an hour of me stimulating the reflex points on your feet, which is, as I said, profoundly relaxing. So there are a number of benefits to it. So not only symptomatically, but because of the deep state of relaxation that you're able to arrive at, the stress levels in your body are reduced massively. 70% of anything that goes wrong with us is a direct result of stress. So we're talking about stress manifesting itself as dis-ease in the body. And that might come in all shapes and sizes and all sorts of conditions. So you can use reflexology in many ways. You can use it as a preventative measure. If you know that you're going through a period of anxiety or stress or challenging circumstances, you can prevent some issues from taking hold, or you can use it when you're prone to certain issues already. So it could be, as in the case of children with special educational needs and disabilities, many of them suffer with anxiety. Many of them suffer with insomnia. And that anxiety hits their stomach in the form of irritable bowel syndrome, which impacts their sleep patterns. And so educating a parent, specifically around their own child, individual child. So in that case, we will do a parent-child consultation where a full medical history is taken. I get a full idea of what's going on with the child. And in that case, that's not a full reflexology treatment, because as I'm sure you can imagine, it can be quite challenging to do that on a small child. What we do actually is more of a first aid session where I get a good understanding of what's going on for that particular family and the challenges that child might be having. And I essentially prescribe them some reflex points to stimulate for their own specific needs. And that comes with diagrams and illustrations and training, obviously, with me. And they go away and they stimulate the points themselves at home. So reflexology is usually, as I said, a holistic treatment which treats the whole body, and that's what would happen if you came to see me or any other reflexologist. But for the children, that could be a bit much, and stimulating particular reflexes such as the pituitary gland, which is on the big toe, found in the head, to aid sleep and melatonin, or stimulating the digestive transit to aid, obviously, digestion, and whatever other, the neural pathways, the nervous system. Spine reflexes are popular for children with special needs as well. So yes, we really look at the whole body, the whole system, and everything that's going on. And with reflexology, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about the physical, it's really about the mental and emotional as well. And I'd even go as far as to say the spiritual, because sometimes you don't know what's going on, but you know something's not right. And a treatment like reflexology can really access all of those areas and work on a very profound level that we really can't explain and hasn't been proven by science. So
that's fascinating stuff, Claire. I appreciate you explaining that further to us. And for the benefit of our listeners, they can go to Claire's website, which will be on the show notes, to get to know more about that as well. Claire, at the top of the show, in the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned how you yourself focused on the positives wherever you could throughout your life and throughout your journey. And you felt that, of course, has only held you in good stead. Perhaps for our listeners who are parents of special needs children and are living this COVID situation, this lockdown situation due to the COVID pandemic, are there any words of encouragement or any tips that you want to leave to those listeners?
Yes, I think for parents and for individuals, as I've said earlier, or for teenagers and young adults, it's no matter who you are, really. I've come to realise in the evolution of raising spirit, I work very closely with a positive psychologist, and I practice a lot of that myself in terms of walking my own talk. And I think that it's really crucial right now, especially with the COVID-19 situation and the circumstances that we all find ourselves in, which are clearly those of complete uncertainty, that we stay very much in the present moment. As I've explained, I've been through quite a few periods of uncertainty in my life, and that has, we could say, some would say that I thrive in adversity. I'd rather not have quite so much of it, but I do enjoy being able to support others as a result of what I've been through. And what you need to think about isn't what you can't do, it's about what you can do. And it's not about trying to visualize what's in the future or reminisce about what was in the past or what particular drama or story you might be stuck in right now. It's about really empowering yourself to figure out what the stepping stone is that you can take immediately, right here, right now, today, and whether that's this morning or this afternoon and no further than that, so be it. And that's the way you navigate through. I mean, everyone's heard the, glass half full or glass half empty. And I really think that that's an important part of what I've been able to do over the years. I know what it's like to be at the bottom, and I know what it's like to feel at my wit's end and that it's hopeless. And for some reason, this inner drive and this interest in emotions and perspective has enabled me to keep on looking for answers. And I can categorically promise anyone who's going to listen to this that if you look for answers, you will find them. But if you carry on looking at what's wrong, guess what's going to happen? You're going to keep on finding what's wrong. And no matter where you are, if you put the work in, you can find solutions and you can move forward and you can make informed decisions and slowly but surely navigate your way through anything.
That's super powerful, Claire, and I appreciate you sharing that. Claire, what are some of the key business lessons you've learned throughout your life?
The key business lessons? Well, let me think. I would say transparency, integrity are really important. Obviously, professionalism, doing what you say you're going to do as well as you possibly can. I try to avoid being a perfectionist because I don't think that that's helpful for anybody. I think, obviously, I come from a background in PR and marketing and communications, so that's really crucial, that no matter what you do, you're always thinking about how you're going to communicate that to your target customers or audience, whether you have a product or a service like me. It's really about communication and yes, as you said earlier, telling your story and walking your talk.
Absolutely. And when you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
Well, I think I'm most proud of everything that I've described on this conversation, and that really is that no matter what I've gone through, I've might have spent a couple of days thinking, poor me, given myself a bit of a break and thought I can have a few days here to figure out what's going on, but I'm going to pick myself up and brush myself off and figure out a plan of how to move forward. And I think that's the piece that's really crucial for everyone listening, and whether that's a family who have neurodiverse children, or a family who've got teenagers that are struggling due to COVID-19, or somebody who's finding themselves in a challenging situation with their relationship. No matter what it is, I just think you have to focus on what you can do, and really put every ounce of energy into trying to find out what that is for you. And I think that's what I'm most proud of, because when I look back, I know that my own personal challenges really inform what I do now. And those personal credentials, really come through in supporting and building trust with the people that I'm working with. The compassion piece, the empathy piece, and the understanding piece is there, which means that I'm not only a robustly trained coach and a reflexologist with, a long-standing background in complementary healthcare and the tools and techniques that I can offer people, but, I've actually genuinely been through it. And I think that can sometimes, not with all coaching clients or reflexology clients, but when needed, that can be a really comforting and reassuring factor in the work that I do.
And that positive energy just oozes through in the conversation we've had so far, Claire. I, for one, have definitely felt inspired by speaking with you, and I'm feeling that extra oomph that goes a long way, especially during a very unusual period like this COVID lockdown situation we're living through. So most definitely thank you for sharing that. What next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
Yes, there are actually. There's a few projects in the pipeline. So, as I said, Raising Spirit is constantly evolving. So I've got a bit to do on my own PR and communications in that respect. Some repositioning, as we would call it in the PR world. So I've got that to do. I am very interested in transactional analysis, and I'm undergoing some more coaching training in that area. The coaching that I do and the continued professional development I do is all based around transactional analysis anyway, but this is taking it one step further. And that's fascinating. So that's happening this month. So it's always good to continue with the qualifications and credentials and improve on my knowledge base in terms of what I have to offer. But I've also got a joint venture coming up, which I'm hugely excited about, with my very good friend, the positive psychologist that I mentioned earlier. And we're developing a new business proposal. And I think I can share the name of it. We haven't got it out there yet. It's still very much in the nurturing stages, but it's going to be called The Feel Good Place. And it's going to do exactly that. It will initially start online. And we'll be combining our practices. So my holistic healthcare, self-care piece with the coaching and the reflexology, and her positive psychology and Pilates. She's a fully qualified Pilates instructor. So we both can complement one another in the work that we do into a fully holistic program, whereby you don't actually need to have a problem to come to us and enjoy the things that we're planning on developing. You will come just to feel good. So that I'm really excited about. I'm working more in the local community. I've spent quite a lot of time with Raising Spirit in Harley Street and in the clinics in London. And I really want to get more involved in the local community now, especially because of the current scenario. I want to work with groups, very much so, to support anybody who's going through challenges around COVID-19. I want to get into the schools and colleges and work with young adults specifically. I think that, the young adults, how do I put this? Children and young adults are our future. And if we don't take care of their needs and look at what it is that we can do to support them to become the best humans they can be, and literally raise their spirits, then we can forget it. We've got to put the work in now to support them and their mental health and empower them to be truly awesome. And that's something that I'm hugely passionate about.
Exciting times ahead.
Definitely, very exciting times.
Excellent. As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So, Claire, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
Well, what do I do to relax outside the office? So I actually now have a health condition of my own due to my own life journey. So I'm managing something called fibromyalgia as well, which is a recent diagnosis, but I'm quite pleased that I've had that because it answers a lot of questions. What that means is that I have to manage my energy levels very, very carefully. So I tend to spend a proportion of my time doing downtime, as it were. So Epsom salts in my bath, listening to music and reading. I love a good Netflix box set. And, live music and socializing with my brilliant friendship group. That just really brings so much joy. So it's about those personal connections for me more than anything, but also balancing the work-life thing and the energy levels is important for me. And I'll add to that in terms of anyone who's listening, if they're going through something, having had the experience of adrenal burnout and exhaustion and thyroid issues and fibromyalgia, really stop and make sure that you're doing what you need to do to take care of yourself.
Yeah, hugely important. And as you mentioned books, are there any that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Oh yeah, there are. There's one book that I only got at Christmas, and I didn't finish it that long ago, and I dropped it in the bath a lot, and it was magnificent, and I loved every single step of the way. It's called The Women Who Run with the Wolves, and it's probably the best book I've ever read. Wow. It's deeply psychological, and it's also deeply spiritual, and although it's called Women Who Run with the Wolves, I would recommend it to anyone, and definitely to men as well as women, because it's full of fairy tales, and the insights are truly, inspiring.
That sounds interesting. I'm going to put that onto the read list for sure.
Yeah, I would. It's a brilliant book.
And are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I've unfortunately I've not had the time to watch too many movies recently due to current circumstances, but there is a TV show called Queer Eye for a Straight Guy, which is marvelous. It's brilliant. I mean, in essence, it's coaching. The disciplines of the 5 guys on the show cover things like fashion and beauty and design and cooking and social care and culture and those types of subjects. And they all come from their own individual backgrounds. Obviously, they each have their own perspectives on things, and they really turn people's lives around and help people who are struggling to become more content and more confident and happier with their lives. So I love that because it's all about empowering those people and doing essentially what I do, but in a different way.
Cool.
On TV. So
Oh, that's really good fun. Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
Well, they can obviously go to the website. So that's www.raisingspirit.com.
Mm-hmm.
On there, you'll find links to social media. So I've got the Facebook page, Instagram, and a Twitter account. And I'm on LinkedIn. And there's also various websites, as I mentioned, who specialists in Harley Street area, who I'm involved with on their teams. That's very much in the area of parenting non-neurotypical children and supporting them alongside the psychologists in Harley Street who are working with those children and families. And I also work with a clinic in Twickenham that specialises in mental health as well. So I'm sort of around all over the place, really. But obviously, I'm currently based in Surbiton, just down the road from Kingston on the river, and I'm mobile, so I can, people can reach me any way they like, really, through any of those platforms, and I'm always available for a conversation, even without coaching or reflexology.
Yeah, and for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure I add these resources to the show notes. Clare, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been lovely talking to you.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.